Sea monsters have been spotted for hundreds of years, but in today's video, we're going to look at several of the most authentic documented sightings and cases in our oceans today. Few metaphors better represent the unconscious mind than the sea. At the surface, it often seems turbulent, capable of changing at a moment's notice. This chaos is superficial, however, providing only the slightest indication of what lurks beneath unfathomable depths of darkness, calm, and monsters. Our unconscious and subconscious minds hold mysteries unknown even to ourselves. It should come off as no surprise that the world's oceans might harbor secrets of their own. There certainly is plenty of room for monsters to hide. As of last year, it was estimated that we have only mapped around 10% of the entirety of the ocean with sonar alone. Even the waters off the United States coast remain largely unexplored territory, with around 35% roughly mapped using modern methods. With so much room for mysteries, literally and figuratively, it comes as little surprise that stories of sea monsters continue to persist through the modern era. The possibility of fantastic beasts hiding beneath the waves finds ample support in a slew of scientific discoveries over the past several centuries. For decades now, Western scientists believe that the coelacanth, a prehistoric species of deepwater fish, was extinct. Surviving populations, though, were discovered in 1938. The coelacanth is relatively small, only about 6 or 7 feet long, so it's easy to imagine how it remained hidden in the vastness of the world's oceans. By contrast, the megamouthed shark can reach 18 feet in length, but wasn't even cataloged until 1976. Even larger monsters have made the leap from myth into reality. Superstitious whispers of creatures like the Kraken finally became scientifically accepted after a multitude of giant squid carcasses had beached themselves in the 19th century. It wasn't until the early 2000s that a live giant squid was actually caught on camera. In short, no one can say for certain whether or not undiscovered beasts of comparable size or larger roam the waterways of our planet. While these creatures have eluded scientific scrutiny, we have no shortage of eyewitness testimony describing a variety of sea monsters. Everything from oversized specimens of existing species to more horrific beasts like sea serpents. Over the years, researchers like Bernard Hevelmans and Gary Mangiacorpa have collected tales of water monsters. These span from ancient history through the contemporary historical record, sightings which take place equally often in the world's oceans as they do in freshwater sources. In 2003, prominent cryptozoologist Loren Coleman and Patrick Weege proposed a new system for categorizing such creatures. These included classic sea serpents, water horses, mystery cetacean, and Saurians, giant sharks, turtles, great sea centipedes, strange Saurian, and more, for a total of 9 categories. While not exhaustive, Coleman and Weege's system is comprehensive enough, making it a little easier to tackle the enormous topic of water monsters. Most of these creatures seem exclusively confined either to saltwater or freshwater, though some, like water horses and giant turtles, appear equally out at sea and roaming inland waterways. We'll start with sightings of creatures in our sea and oceans and cover freshwater sightings at another time. Be warned, these stories may get a little salty. It's difficult, maybe even impossible, to pinpoint the origin of sea serpents. For as long as human beings have traveled the world's oceans or watched from the shoreline, we have believed that the frigid depths have held monsters beyond our comprehension. Countless maps from antiquity showed the unexplored regions of the planet populated by sea serpents, accompanied by the warning, "Here there be monsters." One of the earliest scientific attempts to describe sea serpents appeared in 1555. A Swede, Olaus Magnus, claimed that the ocean held serpents of vast magnitude, namely 200 feet long and 20 feet thick. These beasts lurked in caves along the shoreline, emerging to devour and destroy ships and sailors alike. Around 1752, Bishop Erik Ludvigsson Pontoppidan surveyed the evidence and in his text, The Natural History of Norway, concluded that not only did sea monsters exist, but multiple types of creatures must be responsible for the vast array of reports. Even in this early work, he distinguished between water horses, creatures appearing more mammalian than the reptilian sea serpents. Sea serpents might appear as prehistoric relics with flippers or as immense seafaring snakes, much longer than any known species of sea snake, by the way, which only reach lengths of around 9 or 10 feet. These creatures were once widely held to be as real as any other form of marine life. In the 1600s, European settlers in New England would often spy sea serpents from the shore, either snaking through the waves or sunning themselves on the rocky coastline. When they set off in their ships, these sightings grew more and more dramatic. The American gunship Protector took a short break during the Revolutionary War to open fire on one of the creatures in 1779. It apparently escaped. The following year found Captain George Little squaring off against a sea serpent in Maine's Broad Bay. His ship, the frigate Boston, was in the bay when the captain first saw the beast. He pursued, closing the distance to around 100 feet, but the beast dove in the depths before the ship could actually open fire. He claims it was around 50 feet long, but only 15 or so inches in diameter. It most closely resembled an immense common black snake. Massachusetts saw a rash of sightings in the 1810s. One of the most famous involved Samuel Cabot in 1819, who, on August 14th, saw a horse-sized serpent's head emerge from the ocean 100 to 150 yards away. His report was consistent with the descriptions of others: a gigantic snake or eel-like animal, dark on top, lighter underneath, which undulated across the surface. Despite credible sightings for centuries or more, the idea of sea serpents became a laughingstock by the mid-1800s. But as any cryptozoologist or paranormal researcher, or any zoologist, I guess, will tell you, just because something is laughable, it doesn't mean people don't see it. Sightings continued into the 20th century, sometimes reported by highly credible witnesses. Like in 1936, military personnel flying over the Chesapeake Bay spotted something reptilian and unknown in the water from the safety of their helicopter. This would become known as Chessie, the sea serpent of the Chesapeake Bay. 7 years later, Francis Claremont and Edward J. Ward spotted the creature again in the waters near Baltimore. They said that this thing was about 75 yards away, at right angles from our boat. At first, it looked like something floating on the water. It was black, and the part of it that was out of the water seemed to be about 12 feet long. It has a head about as big as a football and shaped somewhat like a horse's head. It turned its head around several times, almost all the way around. Chessie grew into a topic of national attention in the 1970s, when everyone from tourists to CIA employees began reporting seeing this beast. A video was even shot on May 31st, 1982, purportedly showing a serpentine creature gliding through the water. It appears to be roughly 35 feet long, but only a foot wide, dimensions similar to those reported by George Little in Maine just over 200 years earlier. Around the same time that Chessie was first sighted, locals far away began seeing another strange beast lurking in an inlet. Residents of Cadborough Bay, British Columbia, described their sea monster sighting as a lengthy serpent with either 1 or 2 pairs of flippers and a horse-like head atop a long neck. Beings with a similar appearance can be found throughout Native American legends and art from the region, sometimes drawn upon indigenous canoes to repel the creatures. The whites around the Cadboro Bay cheekily dubbed the animal Cadborosaurus. Some shorten this to Caddy, even though the creature has never been seen hauling golf clubs. At least 9 alleged caddy carcasses have been recovered since the 1930s, but were always disposed of after skeptics identified them as decomposed whales, seals, or basking sharks. This may or may not be accurate. Some of the caddy specimens, particularly one retrieved from the belly of a sperm whale in 1937, exhibit attributes inconsistent with other marine mammals, including a dog-like head, 2 pairs of large fins, and a notable lack of blubber. Debunkers can't dissuade those who have seen the creature alive, though. Several people of varying credibility have claimed to capture juvenile specimens. They always release them, of course. One of the more compelling bits of evidence surfaced in 2009 when Kelly Nash, a local fisherman, filmed around 10 to 15 of the creatures for several minutes. The few bits and pieces that have emerged since then perhaps represent the clearest evidence yet supporting the existence of Caddy. While repeat sightings suggest that breeding populations of sea serpents could congregate around specific bays and inlets, other encounters hint at more widespread distribution. On December 30th, 1947, the crew of the Santa Clara brought the passenger ship just off of Cape Lookout, North Carolina. Around noon, third mate John Axelson spotted something in the water close by, just off the starboard side. It was an eel-like head trailing a dark brown, 30-foot serpentine body. It appeared to be writhing in pain. The ship had apparently collided with the creature, leaving behind an oily red slick on the water, which frothed white each time the sea serpent's coil broke the surface. Axelson brought the creature to the attention of several other crew members who all saw it. By the time the captain came topside, all he could make out was the water churning in the distance. Nonetheless, the Santa Clara radioed an official report to the United States Hydrographic Office telling about their collision. The story was even picked up by New York Times, which ran a formal statement from the captain describing the incident. All told, 5 seamen observed the creature. On June 5th, 1958, Ola Mikkelsen saw a sea serpent of his very own. Mikkelsen had been fishing since he was 6 and was very well acquainted with the denizens of the deep, but what he saw that day bewildered him. He had set out into Maine's Casco Bay with his fishing partner before dawn, when just before daybreak, they saw something so large they initially took it for a submarine. Mikkelsen said that, as it came near, we discovered it was some living thing. It dove down and a tail came up out of the water, and slowly it went down again. In about 3 or 4 minutes it surfaced again, came near us, and dove again. Then it came up once more, about 125 feet away from us, and stopped as if to look over at us. It was at least 100 feet long, light brown, and sported a broad head that looked at them from atop a long neck jutting out of the waves. Mikkelsen, terrified, called for his knife. If it came any closer, they would cut the nets loose and make for the skiff, abandoning ship. Instead, the beast turned, disappearing back into the early morning haze. Good news for Mikkelsen, never bring a knife to a sea serpent fight. Mikkelsen's sea serpent is comparable in size to one spotted off the coast of Stinson Beach, California in 1983. A crew of construction workers saw the creature from the safety of their work site, describing it as 100 feet long and 5 feet in diameter. It was black, making for a good contrast with the surf as it speedily swam and thrashed throughout the ocean. A small head and long neck would regularly surface and look around, trailing several humps or coils. In its wake followed nearly 100 seabirds and around 24 sea lions, perhaps dining on whatever scraps it had left behind. However, a sighting of the same creature 2 years later suggests a more antagonistic relationship. as this time the beast was seen in pursuit of a group of seals. As before, humps could clearly be seen in the water, this time topped by translucent fins. Another massive sea serpent was reported offshore in Alice, Norway on June 1st, 1999. Arnt Helge Molvær was enjoying a walk when, through his binoculars, he spotted a 90-foot-long shape swimming parallel to the beach. It looked like an enormous brown anaconda, maybe 4.5 to 5 feet wide, but bore a short, squarish dorsal fin about a third of the length from its head. Arndt went home, returning within the hour with his son and a video camera. Their footage clearly shows a living creature of colossal proportions moving towards a whale carcass floating further out in the fjord. The creature snatches the whale and moves further out to sea, where a second creature apparently joins it. All of its motions, according to Arndt, displayed a frightening speed. While the footage was shared with Norwegian cryptozoologists and local news outlets, it does not appear to have been made available online. Imagine that. Beyond the exaggerations of seafarers, what could these creatures possibly be? Sea monster carcasses, which wash ashore, referred to by cryptozoologists as globsters, are almost always deemed blubber from decomposing whale bodies. Skeptics proclaim that aquatic cryptid sightings are misidentified marine mammals, especially seals and sea lions, which admittedly can create shapes similar to sea serpent humps. Others believe that witnesses are seeing oarfish. Although sightings are rare, oarfish are absolutely huge, maybe as long as 50 feet for some species, and do look quite serpentine. One of the more novel explanations resurfaces on the internet every few years, where it is often touted as new or groundbreaking, despite it being discussed at length by cryptozoologists. Some people believe that the long necks of sea serpents are actually the erect penises of whales jutting above the water. Talk about free willy, better stay out of the splash zone. Writing off every sea serpent sighting as a misidentification fails when faced with testimony from seasoned maritime professionals. These people know the sea and its inhabitants better than most skeptics ever will. It seems as if they really did see something strange. Therefore, if sea serpents are real, they might represent an undiscovered species of eel, fish, or sea snake. More exotically speaking, some cryptozoologists propose they might be a relict species, a prehistoric holdover. Popular candidates include Basilosaurus or Zeuglodon, a large predatory marine mammal that existed supposedly around 40 million years ago. It certainly fits some of the descriptions offered by eyewitnesses, but none of the fossils as yet recovered suggest that these creatures could even reach anywhere near the massive size found in sea serpent reports. In fact, the largest Basilosaurus skeleton is only 66 feet long. Exactly what sea serpents were or are still remains a mystery. Now, water horses resemble sea serpents but differ in a few key ways. While both exhibit long necks, water horses seem to have more robust bodies, often oval-shaped like those once found in plesiosaurs. Although cryptozoologists once thought that water horses might in fact be surviving plesiosaurs, this idea has fallen out of favor in the recent decades. The primary reason is that water horses seem more like mammals than reptiles. They often exhibit hair, sometimes even full manes and whiskers. Horns, ears, or other protuberances might appear on their heads, which often resemble those of horses, hence their name. The name water horse is actually borrowed from the folklore of Ireland, Scotland, and the British Isles. Many of the lochs, lakes, and rivers of Western Europe have their own water horse and water bull legends. The most famous, of course, is Nessie the Loch Ness Monster. Today, it is much more fashionable to speculate that water horses represent an undiscovered long-necked seal or sea lion species. Coleman and Weege proposed that there might be two subsets of water horses. They deemed these long necks and mer horses, going so far as to suggest that these might be the females and male of the same species respectively. While we are most familiar with water horses and bodies of fresh water, a topic covered at another time, there is no shortage of water horse sightings at sea. Long flowing manes feature in some of the earliest sea monster depictions, such as the work of Olaus Magnus mentioned earlier. In 1846, a captain of the Danish Navy claimed to have seen a maned creature pursuing a pod of dolphins between Iceland and the Faroe Islands, its horse-like head bobbing atop a long neck that moved like a swan's. One of the most infamous maritime water horse encounters occurred on August 6, 1848, only 300 miles off southern Africa. Spotted an enormous serpent with head and shoulders kept about 4 feet constantly above the surface of the sea. It was maybe 60 feet long, a foot and a half wide, and resembled a snake with the exception of a curious mane or clump of seaweed along its back, placing it squarely in the water horse category. Water horse sightings seemed especially common in the final years of the 19th century. American whalers saw a 20-foot water horse with a pair of horns and a spotted brown coat in the fall of 1883. The sighting, which occurred south of Panama, included a second, smaller specimen with a shorter neck. That same year, a similar beast left behind a greasy smear in the waters of the Bristol Channel. A decade later, the crew of a British ship, Amalfi, saw a truly massive water horse, 80 feet long, with 3 humps and a 15-foot long neck. Another beast seen off the coast of Scotland that year resembled a cross between a giraffe and a dinosaur. In the words of the primary eyewitness, a doctor, it was clearly not a sea serpent but a much larger and more substantial beast, with a neck attached to a sizable body. Water horses were rarely considered mundane creatures in European myth. They came with all sorts of baggage, including bad luck and death. Some superstitions may be rooted in fact. On May 22, 1917, the crew of the HMS Hillary spotted a water horse with a cow's head off the south coast of Iceland. The neck was somewhere between 15 and 20 feet long. It was entirely black with the exception of a whitish stripe between its nostrils. A dorsal fin folded limply against itself along the beast's back. This was in the midst of World War I, and never passing on the opportunity for a bit of target practice, the crew opened fire on the beast, scoring a direct hit. The officer of the watch, a superstitious man, was incredibly displeased by their behavior. Seeking to alleviate the bad luck sure to come their way, he requested that the encounter be left out of the ship's log. His superior officer denied this request, however, saying, "Nonsense. Of course I must log the matter as the captain has ordered." At this development, the officer became sullen, saying, "Well, that makes it a certainty anyhow. We shall never reach port again." He was right. In 3 days, a German submarine U-88 sunk the Hillary not far from where they had killed the water horse. After World War II, retired veteran Thomas Helm became a radio newscaster in Panama City, Florida. Helm and his wife were sailing out to the Gulf of Mexico in their yacht from St. Andrews Bay when something began swimming in their direction. The couple initially thought it was an otter. Helm later wrote, "The creature had a head the size of a basketball on a neck which reached 4 feet out of the water. Staring for a brief moment in total disbelief, I quickly turned to attract my wife's attention, but immediately saw that she too saw the swimming creature. It was unmistakably some kind of animal. The entire head and neck were covered with wet fur, which lay close to the body and glistened in the afternoon sunlight. When it was almost beside our boat, the head turned and looked squarely at us. My first thought was that we were seeing some kind of giant otter or seal, but I was immediately impressed by the fact that this was not the face of an otter or a seal. The head of this creature, with the exception that there was no evidence of ears, was that of a monstrous cat. The face was fur-covered and flat, and the eyes were set in the front of the head. The color of the wet fur was uniformly a rich chocolate brown. The well-defined eyes were round and about the size of a silver dollar and were glistening black. There was evidence of a flattened black nose, and just below where I judged the mouth should be was a mustache or stiff black hairs with downward curve on each side. The creature looked at them, turned away, then humorously enough did a double take, almost as if surprised it had been seen. It then went underwater. Helm, who had served with the Navy, was familiar with all types of seals and sea lions, whales, dolphins, and other creatures, and said that this looked nothing like any of those creatures. On May 4th, 1997, two fishermen named Bungay and Clark were fishing when they spotted a pair of trash bags floating in Fortune Bay. They approached to gather the garbage, but soon learned that they were actually part of a 30 to 40 foot long creature. The beast reared out of the bay, revealing a 6 foot long neck and a horse-shaped head with a pair of dark, forward-facing eyes, just like the eyes in Helm's encounter. Two appendages, either ears or horns, sat atop its skull. The beast simply looked at the men before sliding beneath the waves. While some of these sea monsters reported around the world are quite fantastic, others seem much more mundane. This does not mean they are not important. Remember, cryptozoology is the pursuit of all undiscovered animals, both believable and unbelievable. While we might find things like new species of whales, dolphins, turtles, manatees, and manta rays less interesting, their discovery would still represent a major cryptozoological victory. This is especially true in the case of mystery cetaceans, which continue to make news as new specimens are cataloged. Most of these discoveries are beaked whales. Recently, a new species was formally identified in late 2021, named Ramari's beaked whale. It lives at depths of over 6,000 feet. Other examples of less sensational cryptids include oversized manatees and turtles. Their eventual discovery seems quite possible. Not only do we know that smaller species exist, but in the case of mystery manatees, they have actually been studied, only to then disappear. In 1741, a George Wilhelm Steller described a sirenian 30 feet long, nearly 3 times the size of any other species. At the time, there were only an estimated 2,000 left in the wild, which were hunted to extinction by 1768. Or so the official narrative goes. Gigantic manatees have actually been sighted as recently as the 60s. Another sea monster based in the scientific record is the cryptid chelonian, or giant turtle. We know that turtles up to 15 feet long once lived in the late Cretaceous period, but today, the leatherback, the world's largest turtle, maxes out at just short of 6 feet. Yet, people have observed even larger specimens at sea, reporting turtles in excess of 45 feet. The crew of the steamer Rhapsody saw one such creature in 1956 as it raised its massive head a full 8 feet above the waters between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. By far, the most exciting tales of oversized sea creatures involved giant sharks. These are often identified as surviving members of the megalodon species, which 3.6 million years ago might have reached a staggering 66 feet long. Such sightings have become more popular in recent years. However, determining fact from fiction can prove difficult. In 2013, the Discovery Channel produced a mockumentary, often mistakenly taken as factual. Since then, the plots of several motion pictures have also used the animal, further perpetuating its possible existence today. The truth of the matter is that if the megalodon survived, we would likely see more evidence of its existence in the food chain. From time to time, large predators like great white sharks show up sporting wounds, further adding fuel to the fire of speculation. But these wounds could come from other members of their species, or even more likely, orcas, who are known to hunt great whites. It is unlikely that megalodon is still out there. At the same time, scientists analyzing a megalodon tooth found in 1875 determined that it was only 11,000 years old. The blink of an eye in the history of our planet. And while many have been revealed as misidentifications, there are a handful of reputable sightings that cannot be dismissed so easily. For example, in 1918, fishermen off the coast of Australia were retrieving their crab pots when a gigantic, ghostly white shark appeared. It stole their catch, pots, lines, and all. Like all good fishermen, the description of what they saw varied widely from man to man. One said it had been 300 feet long, another, more modest, 115 feet. Either way, it had to have been massive, even accounting for exaggeration. All the fishermen were familiar with whales and remained adamant that this had been something different, that it was indeed a shark they had never seen. Internationally renowned underwater photographer Bill Cuttsinger and his diving companion Heather Perry saw something similar in October of '99 while diving off Deer Island in New Brunswick, Canada. On the return trip to the dock, they heard the sound of a whale breaching. Looking in the direction of the noise, they see a large fin, 6 to 10 feet in length, disappearing beneath the waves. Both were very intimately familiar with all sorts of ocean life, but could not deny what they had seen. It was similar to the tail fin of a thresher shark. That would suggest it belonged to a specimen around 30 feet long. One of the strangest sea monsters has to be the Great Sea Centipede. It is said to have as many as 6 pairs of fins running along its segmented body, ending in a stubby head at the front and sometimes a tail at the back. Stretching up to 60 feet long, the creature notably spouts water vapor from its face as if from a blowhole, and seems largely restricted to tropical and subtropical waters. Westerners first described the creature in works from the 16th century, where it is shown using its flippers like oars to propel it through the water. One of the first reputable sightings took place the afternoon of July 8, 1856, when Captain A.R.N. Tremarny saw a specimen from the deck of the Princess. In the waters off South Africa, there appeared a large fish with a head like a walrus and 12 fins. It spouted a mist before they opened fire on it, hitting it, but failing to retrieve a carcass. A similar beast appeared to the crew of the HMS Osborne 11 years later near Sicily. It looked almost like a seal with rows of flippers along each side. The creature appeared the following year as well, this time compared to a whale as long as a moderate-sized ship, but with 7 or 8 fins. The residents of the Vietnamese coast have a special name for the Great Sea Centipede. They call them conrete. A French doctor, Armand Krempf, founder and director of the Oceanographic and Fisheries Service of Indochina, began investigating the conrete legends in the 1920s. Among the stories uncovered was a tale from a man named Tran Van Con who claimed to have touched one of these dead creatures in 1883. Tran found the headless body near Hongdae. The stench was almost as overwhelming as its size, 60 feet long by 3 feet wide. As in the legends, its body seemed composed of multiple segments which ran like sheet metal when struck with a stick. Jutting out from its sides were a pair of 2-foot-long appendages, far fewer than in typical conrete sightings, and highly suggestive that it may have simply been an undiscovered species of whale. Tran claimed that the body was dark brown on top, yellow underneath. Apparently, the smell became so overpowering that authorities hauled the carcass back out to sea. Sightings of great sea centipedes have continued over the years, often in the waters off Southeast Asia. The last confirmed sighting was 1928, with suspected sightings continuing at least to the 1960s. But what are these great sea centipedes exactly? Cryptozoologists have half-heartedly suggested a number of prehistoric creatures, but, simply put, none seem to be a good fit for these bizarre cryptids. Therefore, we are left with 3 options, more or less. They are either tall tales, a truly unprecedented species of aquatic animal, or something that quite literally sprang from our nightmares. Coleman and Weish call our final saltwater cryptid the mystery Saurian. Descriptions of these sea monsters vary a bit, but typically appear like enormous, out-of-place crocodilians, or a crocodilian with a longer frame, a longer head, and fins instead of feet. For example, during World War II, the German U-boat 28 may have accidentally killed such a cryptid. The submarine had been patrolling the North Sea between Ireland and Scotland when the British ship Iberian appeared in its sights. The U-boat scored a decisive victory, launching a torpedo which destroyed the ship, sending her stern first into the icy depth. As the boat sank, an explosion from the ship tossed a strange creature into the air. According to Captain Lieutenant Baron von Forstner, who was watching the explosion from the U-boat's conning tower, there was a violent explosion. 25 seconds after the ship had gone under, and a few seconds later, a gigantic sea monster was hurled, writhing and struggling around 30 yards into the air. The monster was around 66 feet long, shaped like a crocodile. His head was long and pointed, he had 4 legs, terminating in big fins. He remained above water for around 5 seconds, so there was no time to photograph him. 3 other officers also saw him. After this account surfaced, pardon the pun, another U-boat captain by the name of Werner Loesch came forward to claim that he and his crew had spotted a similar figure on July 28, 1918. This specimen, however, had stretched a staggering 100 feet long. Could these be another example of Basilosaurus surviving into the modern day? Or are these simply crocodilians stranded far from home? Even if they are members of an existing species, out-of-place animals are still of great interest to cryptozoologists. For example, an entire subset of the discipline catalog alligators found in Pennsylvania, or kangaroos found in Wisconsin. There are many such cases. A gigantic crocodile in the North Sea would be almost as wild as discovery of more celebrated cryptids like Bigfoot or Nessie. The global ocean is not only one of these last unexplored regions on Earth, it is the last explored region on Earth, despite covering a vast majority of our own planet. Somewhere around 70% of our planet's surface lies beneath the waves. Anything could dwell in those dark depths, especially if it is shy. Especially if there are few in numbers. With this in mind, plus so many stories through the ages, it seems at the very least possible that sea monsters exist in some form or fashion. Only a fool would think otherwise. But more importantly, I want to hear what you guys think, so be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, I love you guys, keep an open mind, and I'll check you guys out in the very next video.